get started. And so we're going to get started now. Before we get started with the presenters, I'll just underscore that we all use data in a lot of different ways, and having this particular data set, the Kids in Need Annual Impact Survey, is incredibly valuable, because not only do we have that data from our own centers, we have comparable data from other centers all over the country. And if you've ever written a grant, if you've ever talked to a funder, if you've ever been asked, like, what do? You give people pencils. You know how important it is to be able to describe impact, not just using stories, which really is where we sort of sell our mission, but also to be able to back it up with data and evidence-based practices. And so that's what we're going to hear about today. Our three presenters are Dylan Allen from A Gift for Teaching, Ann Gurney from Ann Gurney Consulting, and Nate Warzon from Kids in Need Foundation. They're each going to present, and I will introduce them each again right before they present. We're going to keep their three presentations, which are awesome, by the way, relatively brief, so that we do have plenty of time for questions, because it seems like we always run out of time for that. So without any additional introduction, Dylan, I'm turning it over to you. So if you have any trouble presenting, let me know. I will share your presentation from my screen.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So hi, everybody. And I apologize, last time that we did a webinar, my computer completely had a freak out and I wasn't able to present hardly anything, and really only was able to share a few bits and pieces of wisdom that I've gained from this. I say SSIS all the time, so if you hear that, I mean the School Supply Impact Survey. So I was only able to do it verbally. So I'm hopefully, crossing fingers, we'll be able to actually demonstrate, because it's real hard to talk away Excel. So what I wanted to go through in a super light, but a super brief and super fast way, is kind of some of the techniques that I use in making sure that I can actually use the School Supply Impact Survey a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Everybody cross fingers. All right, are you able to share the wrong screen? Oh, hold on, let me try that again. Screen one, screen two. Here we go. Yes, that one. Great. Can you see tips for the SSIS? Oh, it worked today. Oh, wow. Technology really doesn't like me, but it's here for me today, guys. That's awesome. Great. So in a super fast, brief manner, one, I'm going to very briefly go over the supply portion. That seems to be some of the most important part, at least for A Gift for Teaching. And two, as the quantitative measures and qualitative measures. And three is that I use storytelling as an outcome measure, one of the outcome measures that we use at A Gift for Teaching down in Orlando, Florida. So if you'll see here at the top, and let me change this so you can see this a little bit better. So this top here is what most of you will see when you're working in the actual, when you receive the file, you open up Excel, you have a mini heart attack. It's fine, we all do. Take it and take 3 breaths with me every time with every tab. Especially this one came with about 28 different tabs or so, 28 different questions. So it was a lot to go through, right? So what I did, and I'll put this simply, but I would be happy to explain what this actually means personally at a later time. I used a COUNTIF function to have Excel count out all of those supplies for me. What's so difficult about this year is that the supplies were not like a drop down. They were not a check this, that, or this. It had people hard enter. And so you would have notebook and the notebooks, and you would have composition books. And so tabulating that together, I use a COUNTIF function. It was complex. I don't have time to go through it all today, but it's a nifty little technique that saved me time, but also allowed me to get some better insight where I was able to use, remember, they ranked supplies. So they didn't just say, here's the 5 supplies that we need, but we need this one the most, this one a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. So I was able to then use these weighted functions to count it. So I literally went, if it was the number one thing they wanted, I gave it that times 5. That's its weighted score. If it's number 2 times 4, and so on and so forth. That's how educators oftentimes will kind of weight these grades that matter a little bit more or less towards the final GPA. So as a tip for managing all these big numbers, right? So you skip through whether it be demographic information, whether it be the some of the outcomes that are listed, such as sentiments on a equal classroom, or helping teachers to broaden their projects or deepen the subject matter in which they instruct. I recommend using what's called conditional formatting. And it's up here at the top. It's the very first tab in Excel. It's super simple and easy. Not only will it help you with finding insights a lot faster, but it'll help you share it with your teams a lot faster. And as you're looking back, so again, I'm a grant proposal writer. So when I look back at this, it's much easier for me to, for example, green means good, red means bad. So I would see that like the biggest issues that and things that people had problems with remote was technical issues. So I use red as a cue to help be a mental and visual differentiator to make this mega Excel sheet a little more bite-sized for me and for my team. Another tip that I've used is grouping. So a lot of times we'll use these Likert scales, right? Of whether it be very disagree, neutral, agree, very agree. In this particular case that I have here, you'll see with class participation and preparedness, all of these. See, these are a lot of numbers that I don't care about. For my purposes and the particular style of grants that I write, sometimes I say it's pretty important. Sometimes I say it's important. That's it. I don't have to get into critically important. So what I did is I created new rows. I merged these cells together, and I literally added them together, added the percentages. Well, it's a little more complicated because I actually had to add this and that and divide it by the whole thing. That's averages. But this made it a lot simpler for me to just quickly pull. My marketing manager really appreciated this little bit particularly because this is like the only thing that she really cares about for the most part. This made it a ton easier to be a lot quicker on this and make it a lot easier to use throughout the year and constantly refreshing ourselves, because SSIS has a lot of really great stuff. One question that I get to is how to speak data, right? Because as a grant proposal writer, as a fundraiser, a lot of times we have to be the storytellers behind the data. This one was a particularly difficult part. What percentage of students would you say have been negatively impacted? And then you had a quarter of students, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then all 4 quarters. So to break it down as an example of how to make that meaningful and put that into layman's term, in more than a third of Orange County Public Schools classrooms, most students struggle to learn from home. That's it. You don't have to get super ingrained in these if you want to. If that works for your funders, if that works for your audience, do it. But this is a way that you can kind of more easily go through. And fortunately, that's the conversations that we can have with these, because sometimes with SSIS, we get numbers, and even data scientists will get confused when they get too much and they get confused. Okay, what does this actually mean? But you can reach back out to this group and myself anytime, folks. I see this number. I don't know how to actually conceptualize it for my audience. Next, we have quantitative description. So we had some of these. I just remind you all to go back to your days and stats. Remember and find out what a quartile is, what a third quartile is, what the difference between mean and median are. In brief, means or averages are really great to use to sum up kind of this middle point if there's not something crazy in there. So a perfect example of this actually was the number of dollars that we have teachers in the amount of money they spend every year. I don't remember if it was this year or last year. It was this year. So if you'll see here, the maximum number that we have is $15,000. Obviously, that is not normal. That is not how much many teachers are spending a lot. They're not typically spending $15,000 out of pocket for their students. So when you use a median number, however, that's a more normal. That's what about half of teachers, the entire spread, that middle point is spending about 150. That is clearly more representative. Now, what we do see typically is they spend about $1,000. When I went through and actually knocked them out, you'll see the maximum was 700. The mean was far closer to the normal when we took out this guy, which we call outliers. So remember that sometimes you want to use the average or the mean, and sometimes you want to use the median. So don't forget about these descriptive statistics. They can be really important to telling your story well.
And Dylan, you're at the 6-minute mark. So.
Great, perfect, cool. Because I just got one quick thing left to say is something that, and I mentioned this briefly last call, but I'll press it again. Something that we do at A Gift for Teaching is we have a spreadsheet of stories and quotes. We have a tab for teachers and students, a tab for volunteers, and a tab for our donors. And we use them for all different things. I recommend coding them if you can. And what that means is create a new, literally a new, you'll see this little tag here, these tags. When I put them into my stories spreadsheet, I'll literally say, this one relates to arts program, like just arts, STEM, reading or literacy or whatever works for you. That way, if you're writing for a foundation grant that only funds literacy, you don't have to spend time sifting through potentially dozens of stories. And of course, there's a lot of great storytelling to send back to programs teams, or if the program teams are the ones reviewing these, then whether it be great feedback, like unable to pick up the supplies. This is a thing that we realized that there was an audience that didn't quite work for our distribution model this year. So I've already mentioned this, we're saving it for later. That's about all that I have to go. I'm pretty sure that I went through all of these tips. I'm going to leave them up here for folks to read, and I'll take this moment now to open up any questions that may arise. Sorry, it was like a ton and a lot. Here's your stats 101 class in 6 minutes.
And we can go through the Anne and Nate's presentations and then collect questions at the end too. I know the last session about the impact survey, there were questions that we didn't get to. So anyway, we'll see what we got. Dylan, that was awesome. I'm sure everybody that did take college statistics wishes they had the 6-minute version instead. Full credit offered. So now we're going to move on and hear from Anne Gurney of Anne Gurney Consulting. And Anne's out here in Portland, Oregon with us. She is Schoolhouse Supplies evaluator. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, everybody. All right, I'm going to share my screen with luck. Let's see if I can do it. All right. We'll give you the clean version. How's that look, everybody? We good? Okay. So I have been working with Alice and Schoolhouse Supplies since 2017, I think. We started working together on kind of diving deeper. And Dylan, you get all kinds of points in my book for showing your Excel spreadsheets. I feel like in some ways that's like for an evaluator sharing your dirty underwear, although yours looked very clean, I just want to say. I will not be showing you my Excel spreadsheets today, but I do want to just run quickly through kind of what we've done and some of the thinking that has been going on behind the scenes for what we've done with Schoolhouse and the data here. So the objectives from the get-go was really to look at impact. That was the message that I got from Alice over and over again, was impact, impact, impact. And that was definitely driven by what she obviously needed to communicate to stakeholders, funders, board members, and I'm sure that's a message that resonates with a lot of you. But we also wanted to look at just the functional effectiveness of the program. You know, were the logistics working? Were the supplies needed? That sort of thing. So we have used multiple methods, and I am a big fan of multiple methods. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm such a big fan. But we have had a number of different surveys. I've also done focus groups. I actually did a case study where we looked at one school in a new district. which it meant multiple visits to the same school, deeper interviews with teachers and the administrators there, to kind of get an even broader picture of what the impact is when Schoolhouse Supplies rolls into a new district. And then we've also been kind of looking at the research and looking at how to really see what the impact is. I felt like we've been trying to look for benchmarks that we could really tie the data to. And some research background has really helped us with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. So we did a fall survey that looked at like what were the significant impacts of the supplies distributed this fall. And some of the top things that we found out of that was that the supplies, Schoolhouse, of course, had to completely change how they were actually distributing supplies because of the pandemic. But we also wanted to know like how it was really impacting the teachers and the students. So they said it provided a sense of normalcy. It improved student engagement and attitude. Those are huge buzzwords that we really want to see. Provided a positive point of connection for teachers and students, and improved learning and hands-on learning and task completion and that sort of thing. So those were all really great to see from just the fall of this year. Then we kind of got the results also from the Kids in Need Foundation survey. And for Portland's data, this is just looking at Portland, these were the top student impacts we saw. So class preparedness, self-esteem, class participation. And you can see I sort of interpret those things as meaning that students are ready, they're feeling good about themselves, they're engaged, all of that leading to lower student stress. If we can make that jump, combined with the findings that we had from the fall, then we start looking at the research. We know that stress negatively impacts cognition, memory, and behavior. So if the services that Schoolhouse is providing by providing supplies can actually lower student stress, then we can actually have a positive impact on cognition, memory, and behavior. So this is just a quote directly from our research. It was actually, I didn't even go dig deep. This was a Edutopia, I think, article, if I'm not mistaken. The stress brain resides in a behavior reactive state that is impaired learning and reasoning instead of being in the reflective state. It's not probably surprising. This actually doesn't just affect students. It obviously would affect teachers and adults as well too. So stress is an enemy to learning. We know that. And so that's something we definitely, if we can help with that through the supplies that we're providing, then we're actually making a difference. This was another quote from that same article that Yale, it was quoting a Yale research study that described the neural circuits responsible for conscious self-control as highly vulnerable to even mild stress. And if you go down further, you end up talking about prefrontal cortex, and that you've got long-term memory impacts and affects your executive function. Those are all things that are, again, enemies to learning. So one more, same article, talking about memory and retrieval and controlling the emotional responses. All of those things are things that stress impacts. So if the supplies help with that, then we're actually making progress. So here's the sort of logical leap that we make. Access to supplies goes to reduce student stress, leads to improvements in cognition, memory, and behavior, or certainly produces an environment that can help with that. So that's what we were trying to do. So just on the teacher side, we did a similar kind of thinking. So again, this was from the Kids in Need from this spring, creating an equitable, these were just Portland's, these were our top three, although I think they lined up with the national as well. Creating an equitable learning environment. This is how supplies helped, focusing on other areas of need and their personal budget. I want to specifically just talk for a second about that equitable learning environment, and specifically talk about equity for students with trauma. So again, we can connect that to research. We certainly know that we have a lot of students in trauma in the districts that we are targeting in Portland. And we also have this giant collective trauma that we're all going through with the pandemic. So trauma is a really big topic this year, and it's a big area of concern. So if we can help teachers create relationships with students, then we end up with a better learning environment for the students. So stable relationships with caring adults provide much needed support for students, especially those with traumatic backgrounds. Again, that probably is not super surprising to you, but it is backed up in research. This again was another Edutopia article that was citing a Harvard report from 2015 and talked about how that stable, caring, supportive relationship helps build resilience and really make a difference for students. Same study talking about how, again, that word resilience I've highlighted, science shows that children who do well despite serious hardship have had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. And we've heard that through also the comments that we've seen in the open-ended responses on surveys, how much that the actual supplies help teachers build those relationships with students. So again, just to make it super simple, the access to the supplies gives a really positive point of contact. And boy, this year it really did. We had teachers who were delivering supplies themselves to students' homes. They were taking the packets that were developed by Schoolhouse and taking them to, this was back in the fall, taking them to students' houses. Fantastic connection point in a year without a lot of connection. So it helps them build relationships between the students and teachers, and it leads to resilience. And all of that is good news for learning. So I'm just going to end with my little mini soapbox by saying, like, why do we evaluate at all? We obviously do it, all of us, all the time, but there's a huge number of reasons. These were just a few that I could think of off the top of my head. It gives us guidance on how to improve and refine our programs. I think that's what most people think about. Helps you get moving your program toward effective impact, and it measures that impact. And then it's that communication piece. It gives you the tools, Dylan talked about this, to actually communicate with leadership, boards, community. I didn't put media on here, but that's another place that it can potentially help. It allows you the opportunity to eliminate or verify assumptions that you're making about what may be happening or not happening with your program. And I think that's super important. We all have assumptions. It helps with future program planning, like where do we need to go? And it also helps potentially the broader field through conversations with other people, whether that's formal or informal. And it also communicates care to your stakeholders, including your staff and volunteers. I think when we ask the questions of people about what's really happening and how our services and programs are really impacting them, they get the message that we care about what's happening. Oops. So I would just say, build it into your plan always. You should never have a program plan without an idea about how you're going to evaluate that. Do internal and external if you can. Internal is more affordable. It may require some training of staff or volunteers that you have accessible to you. If you can handle having some external evaluation done, it offers some additional expertise. It gives objectivity and credibility to your data that the internal doesn't. So that's an advantage to having external if you can do it. Use multiple methods. This is where you really can go a little deeper and ask deeper questions about what the survey data already is telling you. It also helps to really speak directly to program users and to gain insights and build relationships. That goes back to that communicating the care part. You really want people to understand that we want to know how we can help, and we want to know how our program can really serve people's needs the best. So that is my quick and dirty, this is what we've been doing, and this is what evaluation is all about. So thanks.
Thank you. That was awesome. And folks can put questions in the chat, and after Nate's presentation, then we can start to answer some of them, and then we'll do the ShareFest. So now from the mothership, Nate, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alice. All right, I'll share my screen here. Let's go share, and then. All righty. So, as Alice said, I'm Nate. I'm with Kids in Need. I've been with Kids in Need Foundation since January. So, kind of came in the middle of the deployment of the impact survey. So and was a big part of the analysis of it and distributing results to the resource centers. So with that said, this should go fairly quickly. I know we're a little bit behind schedule. So the first thing you really need to understand with any of our goals, and kind of touched on this from a resource center perspective, and now looking at it from that macro lens, is really identifying, recognizing, and acknowledging the gaps that exist across the United States in the education system. And there's three primary gaps that our CEO talks about frequently. Corey Gordon, he's very outspoken and it incorporates these gaps in our mission, and it's something that I've really embraced. And so the first one is the learning gap, which refers to the relative performance of individual students. So basically, the disparities that exist between what a student has actually learned and what the student is expected to learn. So say you're supposed to know cursive by grade 3. Does everybody in grade 3 know cursive? And I think the answer to that is obviously no. And obviously that's a very simple example, but just to kind of conceptualize that. And then that goes into the achievement gap. And this refers to the outputs, which are the unequal or inequitable distribution of educational results and benefits. So this is a lot of that standardized testing, things of that nature that are utilized to basically see how students are performing in different districts, schools across the United States. And the gap that we all are a huge part of, and the gap that is really the foundation of it all, is the opportunity gap. And this refers to the inputs, what's being put into these districts and schools. And as I think we all recognize, the distribution is not equitable. There is an unequal or inequitable distribution of resources and opportunities across districts. And as I mentioned, this is the gap that our mission at Kids in Need and all of our resource centers directly address. A really good example of this is districts where the majority of students are white. An average of $2,200 more is spent per student, which equals approximately $23 billion less being spent on districts with a majority of students of color. And that's from EdBuild within the past couple of years here. So really the big thing to know here is adequately addressing the opportunity gap will empower our teachers and students to close that learning gap, which will then in turn close the achievement gap, bringing a much more equitable situation as far as education goes. And really it all starts with us and ensuring that that opportunity is equal across the board. So going into some of the other high level results, the biggest one here is the percentage of teachers that indicated that having access to supplies was very or critically important to impacting the following categories. So their ability to create a more equal learning environment, their personal budget, their ability to focus on other areas of need. And you can see the rest here. 8 out of 10 teachers at least were indicating that having access to these supplies was very or critically important. So on that Likert scale, those teachers answered a 4 or a 5. That's an extremely top-heavy response, and just speaks to the importance of having the access to those supplies and the importance of our mission together collectively. And then which goes into specifically having the free supplies from the specific resource centers. Again, and this is one outlet for supplies, and you can see how important that was as well to these teachers for the categories such as class preparedness, class participation, self-esteem. And a student having access to supplies makes them feel better about themselves because they know they're prepared and they're on par with their peers. It increases their interest in learning, their social engagement. It's critically important to all of these things to have access to the supplies from the resource centers, which you all work with. The results speak for themselves. The survey results are extremely powerful. It doesn't take long to glance at them and say, wow, between the stories being told and the numbers in front of you, our mission is extremely important to creating an equitable experience for these students. So then looking forward, which is we're always looking forward as an organization. What do we need to provide to continue to stay ahead and ensure that teachers are getting what they need? So as you all know, 2020 was an extremely challenging year. It presented numerous challenging variables for teachers. So with that said, they were asked to rank categories they needed additional support in. And I don't think anybody's surprised to see technology at the top by a wide margin. So technology, STEM, which the T in STEM also stands for technology. So another part where technology comes into play. Teachers are needing technology to ensure that students are getting the learning experience that they need. So something to keep in mind as we keep moving forward in adapting to the needs of the schools. They're always going to need those core supplies, but what peripheral supplies can we bring in to supplement those core supplies to continue driving our mission forward? So with that said, looking ahead in 2020, all of the resource centers combined with Kids in Need Foundation serve 205,000 teachers and 5 million students, which is huge. I mean, that's a lot of teachers and students. And our goal that we have set as an organization and is being piloted or being driven by our CEO, really a goal that we want to achieve with all of you is in the next 5 years, we want to have that yearly impact doubled. So to 500,000 teachers and up to 10 million students impacted by the supplies that we have. So always looking ahead, continuing to strive for more to provide equitable education resources for students. So I thank you all for your partnerships with Kids in Need Foundation. We can't do what we do without you. And it's just an extremely valuable partnership that we have with all of you.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was awesome. And then, so yeah, stop screen sharing there. And then that's great. Here's a question. Do we know how many students nationwide are in need of or qualify for our services?
I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. It's something that can certainly be pulled and something that our marketing department likely has as well. But I do not have that information on hand at the moment.
That's a great question. Are there other questions? Go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll monitor that. And I will start sharing. We, like I said, I have 7 infographics. So we'll hit Kids in Need Foundation. I'll show Schoolhouse Supplies, then Education Partnership, then Classroom Central, Teachers Treasures, Gift for Teaching, and then Classrooms. So, you know, it's coming up. Okay, now I'm going to screen share and hope this works. Okay. Here we go. All righty, here is Kids in Need Foundation's impact summary from last year. Michaela said, this is the most digestible form of the annual impact survey report. It's meant to be read from left to right to tell a story, and it wraps up talking about how the network is helping make a positive impact on need. Let me get this out of the way. The next one, and I'm just going to whip through these first 2 so we can get to the others. This is Schoolhouse Supplies impact graphic from last year. It's a 2-sided piece that is made to fit in a standard envelope, and we actually used it as the insert for last summer's back to school fundraising appeal. And should we ever go back to tabling, it's a format. I don't know why people like to take stuff, still take paper, but it is a size that's convenient for that as well. And I will put all of these into Basecamp, into the marketing and the executive director base camp. With that, I'll mute myself, and Josh, you're up next.
Great. Thanks so much, Alice. So just a couple things I want to point out on our outcomes sheet here. So we try and make it just a one-sheeter, you know, something that a donor or I don't know, any constituent can just glance at very quickly. So at the top, you see our students, teachers, schools, and then deployments from the year previous. When you go down, you know, we like to use our data usually in tandem with Kids in Need Foundation data. I think it gives you quite a bit of credibility as a center to say, you know, these are our benchmarks and we're benchmarking ourselves against our national affiliates. Now, Kids in Need Foundation has changed some of the categories that appear in their report versus whenever we originally started doing this report. So it's not a direct correlation, but we like to track attendance, homework completion, academic achievement, self-esteem, classroom participation, and creativity. We do the same thing. We take and we add together the critically important and the very important categories for improvement. And that's where we get our 65, 89, 94. Oh, I just noticed our pencils are now out of alignment. They're out of size order. We'll have to go back and correct that. But the most important thing when I'm explaining this data is making sure that the person reading it understands the data, and that we're not saying attendance increases by 65%. It's that 65% of our teachers reported improved student attendance. And I think that's a really key, it's a key piece of explaining this data, and it's a key piece of how we need to be better at gathering data. I really liked what Anne's study turned up in terms of supplies reduce stress leads to increases in learning. You know, I'd love to remove that jump, remove that that stress piece. The same thing, supplies lead to increased relationships lead to increased learning. Again, you know, we're working somewhat to try and find a solution to how do we directly connect supplies to the achievement gap, that opportunity gap to the achievement gap, and what data is there. I just don't think we're there yet. So that's the first piece of how I like to use our data. Something that's not represented here that I usually follow up if I know the person that I'm talking to is going to be more interested in their return on investment in TEP than our actual impact. So when I'm writing grants, or whenever we're working with any funders, we use the data you see in front of you and we compare it to the national benchmarks. It's usually if I'm talking to an individual donor and you're trying to make the case of, you know, the education partnership versus their other charity of choice, I'll bring up the return on investment and I'll say, you know, our organization operates on a $1.1 million budget, and last year we were able to deploy $7.4 million. So at the very basic level, you're looking at a 7-to-1 ROI on your dollar. And I think depending on who you're talking to, it can be compelling to present your financial data instead of your outcome data, but obviously that's not represented on this sheet.
Good point. Okay, next is Classroom Central. Karen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to you, Alice, and to Joel for making this possible. It is awesome, awesome, awesome to be able to learn from everybody, especially since we've missed 2 years of summits now. So I really miss seeing you guys. I also want to give a shout out to Maddie Stevens, who's on the call. She's our Director of Marketing and Communications, and she is the person that put this sheet together. I will just explain a little bit about this because it's different from what has been shared so far. In addition to communicating our impact data with donors and through various media and social media channels, we are starting to communicate our impact directly with teachers as a way to boost participation in our programs. You know, 20 years ago when we started Classroom Central, I think none of us ever felt that we would be marketing to teachers. We thought we would build it and they would basically blow our doors down, and that has never been the case. We spend an inordinate amount of time communicating with teachers, marketing to teachers, and we really feel like sharing our impact is certainly one way to do that. And so we are starting a new program in July geared primarily at beginning teachers. So those teachers that are in their very first year on the job. And we're starting a pilot program with 750 teachers that fit into that category. And this is one page of a catalog of information that will be presented to them in a subscription box program. They are automatically enrolled into the subscription box program by virtue of being a brand new teacher in a school that's eligible to utilize our services. They don't have to do anything to receive it. They'll get a subscription box full of course supplies and some seasonal add-on supplies 4 times a year, so on a quarterly basis. And then they're also going to be able to visit our other programs or utilize our other programs in addition to what they'll automatically receive through the subscription service. So this, like I said, is just one page of a really awesome catalog of information. But we feel that, you know, it does provide a good kind of data point on exactly why they should shop at Classroom Central, but also some testimonials from other teachers that we've captured. And certainly everybody wants to know what's in it for them. Well, at the very bottom, the average trip to Classroom Central is worth $468 in free supplies. So it may make it worth their while to drive across town to visit our program and services. So that's how we use it.
That is awesome. And I think we all are looking forward to hearing how that pilot program goes.
We are too.
The next is Teachers Treasures. Emily?
Yeah. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different path here. I primarily made this to represent all of our data to the board. So when we were just telling them about the survey, we kind of looked at this as how are our teachers managing during the time of COVID-19? You know, what were their issues? What were their struggles? And how can we better serve them, knowing that these issues exist? So I really like to focus in on, you know, just showing the teacher's background, showing what they're putting up with themselves, you know, when it comes to salary, you know, issues, stuff like that. And then, oh, sorry. Get a phone call right in the middle of my Zoom thing. I apologize. I really just wanted to highlight some of the biggest data points for them. As you can see, like 86% down there said that their local resource center was super important during COVID. And that was really big because 440 of our teachers responded. So getting that big of a feedback was incredible. We also like to use this to, you know, look forward how to navigate some of these new issues that COVID brought up. On the second page, I talk quite a bit about the digital divide. And I really liked pulling in what teachers said, just because the data and the story really fit together really well. So looking at this and seeing, you know, what teachers are dealing with, what they could use extra help with, figuring out what we can and can't help them with. You know, such as we'd love to, we can't give every single student out there a computer and access to Wi-Fi, but we can help the teacher solve, you know, basic supply needs so that teachers can help focus in other areas. So we'll be using this in, I believe, our appeals. We'll be posting it honestly on social media just to help educate like our support base and everything like that. And I believe we'll also be using it in some other future mailings as well. So yeah.
Thank you. These are awesome resources. Oh, and now a gift for teaching, Dylan.
Awesome. So yeah, so this is our annual school supply impact report. We do this as it's a 2-pager, but the other side is kind of like an about us. It shows some of our programs as well as our impact. We have a little report card for all of our operations in that past year, as well as since beginning of time. So what this side is, so that's kind of a bit of a background of one side of it is about programs and AGFT specifically, and this one is kind of the impact and importance in school supplies. So as you can kind of see, we have this, each of our kind of outcomes that we say that we pull from the school supply impact survey are measured up here. We've toyed around with this. It used to be a 2-page document, and we've kind of merged it into one and crammed it together a lot. Like I mentioned, we use a lot of our stories as kind of measuring our outcomes. That's something that's super important for our funders, and we find actually is a bigger sway than anything else is storytelling. So we're really keen to include quotes. And not only do we get these quotes from School Supply Impact Survey, but every once in a while, this is super cool and I love this, teachers will actually comment and post on our social media, such as like on Instagram or something like that. And that's like a super cool thing when a teacher's like, hey, I just want to appreciate all y'all are doing. Oftentimes, we get longer stories that we want to put in, we're not able to use here, but we still maintain them, keep them in the back of the pocket, especially for presentations. And then our top 5 or 6, usually we do top 5, not this year, but last year we did top 6 because we had 2 in the same running. I will make a note that not only is this pulled from School Supply Impact Survey, but we also, of course, track it based off what supplies we currently have in-house. But yeah, otherwise, I think that this is fairly self-explanatory. This one has not been updated since the School Supply Impact Survey came around. So this is using the this was created like halfway through 2020 year. We put that out like immediately before receiving it this year. We haven't updated it yet.
Thank you. So I don't know if anyone from Crayons to Classrooms in Dayton is on the call, but this is their infographic. If anyone's there and you want to say a few words about this, Joel can patch you in to the audio. So say something in the chat if you are. Otherwise, we are in a good time position for any questions, although I know we all know how to reach each other too. So I'm sure that all our presenters would be happy to respond to any questions in the future or forward your email to someone who can. Right, well, panelists, is there anything else you'd like to add that we want to be sure that we communicate to our participants, or anything we want to be sure we get in the recording?
Something for the analyzing the school supply impact survey. I mean, you'll notice a lot with my presentation, like there were some things that I went like a little bit more in depth than most of you will realistically have use for, but I recommend that you try and, when you roughly know when it's going to come to you, like calendar out a few hours. It does, I will say, the level of depth that I spent, it took me about 2 to 3 days to analyze it. It doesn't have to take that long for most people. You probably can get through your insights in about 2 hours, but 2 to 4 hours, again, depending on how sophisticated and what you'll need for your organization. But I recommend calendaring it out so that you can plan to look through. In the last panel, we learned that there was a fairly substantial number of folks who either had never opened it or just opened it and then ran away screaming. While that is an acceptable response, it's just, like I said, take breath and look through, and you'll actually realize while there's a lot that's involved in each page, there's probably like 4 cells out of each tab that you'll actually use. So it's much easier.
All right, anybody else? Anything to add? I have long prided myself on always ending early. So thank you very much to everybody who participated and everybody who presented today. I guess I can stop screen sharing. Thank you all, greatly appreciate it. I will put, if it's okay with the panelists, I'll also put your PowerPoints in